Hello and welcome to our podcast, episode number 84. A criminal's desperate lie leads to a massive conspiracy reveal. I'm Timothy, and I am here with my dear friend, Thomas. Today, we are going to discuss a film called The Usual Suspects. There will be spoilers. The Usual Suspects is a 1995 crime thriller about a group of criminals who are framed for a truck hijacking and decide to pull off a heist to get revenge on the police. They become embroiled in an elaborate scheme involving a mysterious figure named Keyser Söze, who turns out to be their mastermind all along. The movie is known for its twists and turns and starred Kevin Spacey as Verbal Kint. So, Thomas, did you like The Usual Suspects?
The Usual Suspects is one of those films that I've seen more than once, but it's been quite a while since the last time. I remember thinking it was pretty good when I first watched it, but now, looking back, well, let's just say it holds up better as a classic than as a masterpiece. The story is full of twists and turns that make you question everything you think you know about the characters. As for Kevin Spacey's performance as Verbal Kint, I thought he did an excellent job of portraying a man who is both manipulative and vulnerable at the same time. He really brings out the complexity of the character with his subtle facial expressions and body language.
I must admit that I was rather disappointed by the film. I found it to be too convoluted for its own good, with plot twists piled upon each other until they lost their impact. And while Spacey's performance is undoubtedly great, I couldn't help feeling that his character was too over the top at times.
Over the top? How do you mean? He plays a con artist who is trying to manipulate everyone around him. That's the whole point of his character.
Yes, but there were moments where it felt like he was chewing scenery more than delivering a convincing performance. Don't get me wrong, Spacey is a talented actor. But I think in this case he was given a role that didn't quite suit him as well as some of his other work has.
Well, everyone has their own opinion on these things. I still enjoy revisiting The Usual Suspects every now and then for its clever storytelling and memorable characters. But what about you, Timothy? Is there anything in particular that stood out to you during your viewing?
I suppose the film did have some interesting themes about identity and deceit. It's clear that everyone in the story is hiding something from each other, which adds an element of suspense as we try to figure out who can be trusted and who is just playing a role.
That's true. The movie does a great job of making you question your assumptions about the characters. And now I have a question for you. Do you think Verbal Kint was actually Keyser Söze?
That's part of the twist ending, isn't it? I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen the film yet. But let's just say there are some compelling pieces of evidence to suggest he might be. The revelation is certainly one of the most shocking moments in cinematic history.
It sure is. And that's what makes The Usual Suspects such a fascinating watch. You never know who to trust. And even when you think you have it figured out, there's always another layer to uncover. That's why I enjoy discussing these kinds of films with my dear friend Timothy here on our podcast. It's a chance to explore all the intricacies and nuances that make up this complex narrative world.
Well said, Tom. We may not always agree on every aspect of a film, but that's what makes these discussions so engaging. And now I'm curious to hear more from our viewers about their thoughts on The Usual Suspects. Do you have any questions or comments for us?
You're absolutely right, Timothy. We love hearing from our viewers and getting their perspective on these films. So, let's dive back into the story of The Usual Suspects. One thing that really stood out to me was the way the film used flashbacks and unreliable narration to build suspense. Throughout the movie, we see events unfold through Verbal Kint's eyes, and as it turns out, He isn't exactly telling us everything that happened. The use of these techniques kept me on the edge of my seat, wondering what was really going on beneath the surface.
I agree that the flashbacks were quite effective in keeping us invested in the story, but I also felt like they could have been used more sparingly to maintain their impact. At times, it felt like there were too many twists and turns being thrown at us, which made it harder to connect with any one particular aspect of the narrative.
That's an interesting point, Tim. I can see how having too many flashbacks could be overwhelming for some viewers. But personally, I enjoyed the constant shifts in perspective as they added to the overall sense of mystery and uncertainty surrounding Keyser Söze's identity. It kept me guessing right up until the very end.
I suppose it all comes down to personal preference then, doesn't it? As for me, while I did appreciate the performances and some of the filmmaking choices made by director Bryan Singer, ultimately, The Usual Suspects didn't quite live up to its reputation as a classic in my eyes. But that doesn't mean I won't be checking out some of his other work or even giving this movie another chance down the line.
I understand where you're coming from, Timothy, and I respect your opinion on the matter. For me, though, The Usual Suspects is a film that continues to reward rewatching as you discover new nuances in both the storytelling and characterization. And who knows, maybe upon further viewings, you might find yourself changing your mind about certain aspects of this intriguing crime thriller. Well, said Timothy, now let's move on to some interesting trivia about The Usual Suspect. Did you know that Christopher McQuarrie, the writer of the film, initially struggled to sell his script due to its unconventional structure and plot twists? He even went door to door trying to pitch it to different studios before finally finding Bryan Singer, who was willing to take on this challenging project. And speaking of the cast, several big names were considered for roles in The Usual Suspects, but eventually passed on them due to scheduling conflicts or other commitments. For example, Nicolas Cage and Michael Keaton were both offered parts before Kevin Spacey signed on as Verbal Kint.
That's fascinating.
It just goes to show that sometimes the best projects are the ones
that aren't immediately embraced by everyone in Hollywood, and it's a testament to Singer and McQuarrie's vision that they were able to overcome those initial hurdles and create such an influential film. As for the soundtrack, I remember really enjoying it during my viewing. It had this gritty noir-ish feel to it, which perfectly complemented the story being told on screen. What about you, Thomas?
Any favorite tracks from The Usual Suspects score?
Absolutely, Timothy. One of my personal favorites is Misterioso Pizzicato by Ennio Morricone, which plays during Verbal Kint's interrogation scene. The haunting melody really adds to the tension and suspense in that particular moment. Another great track is Watusi Rodeo, a lively instrumental piece by Yellow that provides comic relief during one of the film's more light-hearted moments, involving a briefcase full of cash.
Oh, yes, those are both great choices. The score definitely contributes to the overall atmosphere of the film. And speaking of the soundtrack, I recently read an interesting article that claimed Kevin Spacey actually contributed some of his own music to the film under a pseudonym. Is there any truth to this rumor?
Well, according to McQuarrie himself, it's true. The director revealed in an interview that Spacey composed several pieces for the movie, using a synthesizer, and even provided some vocals for one particular track. However, he chose not to include his real name in the credits as he wanted his work to stand on its own merit without any association with him or Verbal Kint's character.
That's quite an interesting fact. It just goes to show how dedicated Spacey was to bringing this film to life and how much he invested in his role as Verbal Kint. And now I have a question for you, Thomas. What do you think is the legacy of The Usual Suspects? Has it stood the test of time, or has its influence on cinema been overstated?
That's an excellent question, Timothy. While some may argue that The Usual Suspects hasn't aged as well as other classic films from the same era, I believe its impact can still be felt in contemporary cinema today. Its innovative storytelling techniques and twist ending have become hallmarks of modern crime thrillers, influencing countless directors and writers over the years. And let's not forget that it earned Academy Awards for Best Screenplay and Best Supporting Actor. So there you have it, folks. Our discussion on The Usual Suspects has been quite eventful, filled with both agreements and disagreements. We've covered everything from the film's trivia to its soundtrack and legacy. What are your thoughts on this classic crime thriller? Do you agree with Timothy or Tom? Let us know in the comments below.
Well, Thomas, I think it's safe to say that we both have different opinions on The Usual Suspects, but that's what makes discussions like these so interesting. As for the soundtrack, I agree that it does contribute significantly to the film's overall atmosphere and helps to build suspense during key moments. It's clear that a lot of thought was put into the selection process to ensure each track perfectly complements the on-screen action.
Truly, Timothy. The soundtrack plays an essential role in creating an immersive viewing experience for the audience. And it's not just limited to the well-known tracks like Misterioso Pizzicato or Watusi Rodeo. There are also several songs featured in the background that add depth and texture to various scenes without being overly intrusive. For instance, during a tense conversation between Verbal Kint and Keyser Söze's lawyer, we can hear Bobby Darin's Beyond the Sea playing in the background, which adds a sense of melancholy that perfectly captures the mood of their encounter.
That's true, Thomas. The use of music is quite subtle yet effective throughout the film. It manages to enhance the emotional impact of certain scenes without being overbearing or distracting from the story itself. And I have to say I particularly enjoyed the choice of using Watusi Rodeo as a comedic relief during one of the more intense moments in the film. It was just enough to lighten up the mood without taking away from the tension that had been building up until that point.
Exactly, Timothy. The music is used skillfully by director Bryan Singer and composer John Ottman to create a sense of balance between drama and levity, while also reinforcing themes present in the narrative. For example, during a flashback sequence where Verbal Kint recounts his first meeting with Keyser Söze, we hear Gustavo Santaolalla's La Chacarera playing in the background, which adds an air of mystery and intrigue to their encounter, while also hinting at the darker undertones that will later be revealed about these characters.
That's a very astute observation, Tom. The music definitely plays a significant role in shaping our perception of these characters and their interactions. And it's interesting how it can be used to both reveal and conceal information about them depending on the situation. For instance, during Verbal Kint's interrogation scene where he's discussing his involvement with Keyser Söze, we hear Ennio Morricone's Misterioso Pizzicato, which adds an element of suspense and uncertainty to his narrative.
Truly, Timothy. The use of music in this film is truly masterful. It manages to enhance every aspect of the storytelling without ever becoming overbearing or distracting from the plot. It's clear that a lot of thought and care went into selecting each track, and that attention to detail only serves to elevate The Usual Suspects further as an exemplary piece of cinema.
Absolutely, Tom.
And speaking of which,
let's talk about the cast of The Usual Suspects and how they bring these complex characters to life on screen. Kevin Spacey as Verbal Kint is simply amazing in this role. His portrayal of a seemingly innocent cripple who turns out to be one of the most cunning criminals ever is nothing short of brilliant He manages to convey both vulnerability and menace with equal ease, keeping us guessing about his true intentions right up until the film's shocking conclusion.
I couldn't agree more, Timothy. Kevin Spacey truly owns this role, making it one of the most memorable performances in his illustrious career. And it's fascinating to learn that he also contributed some music to the film under a pseudonym, as you mentioned earlier. His versatility as an artist is truly remarkable.
Definitely, Tom. The entire cast delivers outstanding performances, bringing depth and nuance to their characters.
Gabriel Byrne, as Dean Keaton, for instance, is excellent as Verbal Kint's partner in crime who harbors secrets of his own. He manages to convey a sense of resignation mixed with determination throughout the film, which adds an extra layer of complexity to his character.
That's true, Timothy. Byrne does an excellent job of portraying Dean Keaton as someone who's been through a lot and has learned to cope with the harsh realities of their line of work. His interactions with Spacey's Verbal Kint are some of the highlights of the film, especially during their conversation about Keyser Soze's true identity.
And then we have Benicio del Toro as Fred Fenster, who provides plenty of comic relief with his quirky mannerisms and hilarious one-liners. Yet beneath this facade lies a character capable of great violence when provoked. Del Toro does an amazing job of balancing these contrasting aspects of his character, making him both lovable and terrifying at the same time.
Absolutely, Timothy. His performance is both hilarious and chilling in equal measure, which adds another layer of depth to this already complex narrative. And let's not forget Chazz Palminteri as Dave Cujan, the dogged police detective who's determined to solve the case at any cost. His intense gaze and unyielding determination serve as a stark contrast to Verbal Kint's manipulative charm, which makes their interactions all the more compelling.
That's true, Tom. Palminteri does an excellent job of portraying Dave Cujan as both a dedicated law enforcement officer and a flawed human being. His obsession with catching Keyser Soze clouds his judgment at times, which adds another layer of realism to the character. And I have to say, Pete Postlethwaite's portrayal of Kobayashi was also quite memorable.
Oh, absolutely, Timothy. His performance is both intimidating and strangely charming, all at once, which makes him an intriguing presence throughout the film. I have to give a shout out to Stephen Baldwin, who played Michael McManus in The Usual Suspects. He managed to make quite an impression with his intense gaze and commanding presence on screen.
Definitely, Tom. His performance as the vengeful former criminal Michael McManus adds another layer of tension to the film, especially during his confrontation with Verbal Kint. And it's interesting how even minor characters like him have such a significant impact on the story. Well said, Tom. I think we can all agree that The Usual Suspects boasts an incredible cast who bring their best game to this thrilling crime drama.
Surely, Timothy. And speaking of contributions, it's impossible to discuss The Usual Suspects without acknowledging its cultural impact on cinema as a whole. The film has been hailed for its innovative storytelling techniques and twist ending, which have become hallmarks of modern crime thrillers. Its influence can be seen in countless movies that have followed in its wake, from Christopher Nolan's Memento to Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction. The film also introduced many viewers to the works of director Bryan Singer and screenwriter Christopher McQuarrie, who would go on to collaborate again on films like X-Men and X2.
That's very true. Tom, The Usual Suspects definitely paved the way for future filmmakers to take more risks with storytelling and experiment with narrative structure. It's interesting to think about how this movie might have influenced other directors like Nolan or Tarantino, who are known for their unconventional approaches to filmmaking. And speaking of influences, I also think it's worth mentioning the impact The Usual Suspects had on the crime drama genre as a whole.
Surely, Tim. The Usual Suspects not only redefined what a crime thriller could be, but also offered a fresh take on traditional film noir tropes while still paying homage to them. By blurring the lines between truth and fiction, the movie forces us as viewers to question everything we see on screen, which is characteristic of classic noirs like The Maltese Falcon or Double Indemnity. But it also introduces elements of dark humor and unexpected twists that set it apart from its predecessors.
That's a really interesting point. Tom, it's fascinating how the film manages to combine these seemingly disparate aspects of crime drama and noir genres so seamlessly. And I think one of the reasons why The Usual Suspects has remained such a beloved classic is because it appeals to a wide range of audiences, whether you're a fan of action-packed thrillers or more cerebral mysteries. There's something for everyone in this movie.
Surely, Timothy, The Usual Suspects truly transcends genre boundaries, which is why it continues to resonate with audiences around the world even decades after its initial release. And let's not forget about its impact on popular culture as a whole. The film's iconic line, "The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing." The world he didn't exist has become part of our collective consciousness. Often quoted in various media, including TV shows like The Simpsons or movies like The Dark Knight.
That's a fantastic point, Tom. It just goes to show how pervasive and influential this film really is. And I think the fact that it continues to inspire new generations of filmmakers and viewers alike speaks volumes about its lasting cultural significance. So what do you think, Tom? Has The Usual Suspects held up over time? Do you think it's still relevant today, or is its influence being overstated?
I think it has held up remarkably well, Timothy. Yes, some of its special effects may look dated now, but the storytelling remains as compelling as ever. And when you consider how innovative this movie was back in 1995, it's clear that its influence on modern cinema is undeniable. So I would definitely say that The Usual Suspects is still relevant today and will continue to be so for years to come.
It's a testament to the film's quality that it manages to stand the test of time in this ever-changing industry. And I think one reason why it remains so popular is because its themes are universal. We all want answers. We all crave closure, and The Usual Suspects delivers on both fronts while still leaving us with questions.
That's true, Timothy. It's a masterful blend of suspense, mystery, and dark humor that keeps us engaged from beginning to end. And I also think the film's portrayal of the criminal underworld is quite realistic, which adds another layer of authenticity to the story.
Indeed, Tom. The characters in this movie feel like they could exist outside of their fictional world, which makes them all the more relatable and engaging. And I think that's what sets apart great films like The Usual Suspects from mere popcorn entertainment. They make us think, they challenge our preconceived notions about the world around us, and most importantly, they entertain us.
Indeed, Timothy. That's why we watch movies in the first place, isn't it? To escape reality for a while and be transported into another world where anything is possible. And The Usual Suspects does exactly that while still providing us with an intriguing storyline and well-developed characters.
I couldn't agree more, Tom. It's a rare gem in this age of reboots, sequels, and remakes that manages to stand out from the crowd. So let's wrap up our discussion for tonight by giving The Usual Suspects a well-deserved round of applause and appreciation.
Yes. Bravo, Bryan Singer, Christopher McQuarrie, Kevin Spacey, Gabriel Byrne, Benicio del Toro, Chazz Palminteri, Peter Postlethwaite, Stephen Baldwin, and the entire cast and crew of this incredible film. They have all given us a timeless masterpiece that will continue to captivate audiences for generations to come.
And now it's time for our usual outro.
Don't forget to like, comment,
and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating discussions about films like The Usual Suspects. We'll see you tomorrow with another thrilling movie review from Tim and Tom's Film Nights. Until then, keep watching movies and never stop discussing them.